Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Son of a Blitch podcast. I'm your host, George Blitch, and I just wrapped up an incredible conversation with Janis Putelis from MeatEater. We ended up talking about his early life, kind of how he got involved in, his love of the outdoors and eventually guiding, and then eventually meeting up with Steve Rinella and becoming part of the MeatEater team. We talk a little bit about his role there. Obviously he's a co-host with the MeatEater podcast. I think he's about 75% of those. We talked about his own subsection of the shows. The MeatEater YouTube page hosts the On the Hunt. He did Gear Talk previously with Jordan Budd, but On the Hunt, we kind of focused on one two-part episode in particular, and that was his trip back to Latvia to do a hunt there. That is his father country. He had never been there before in his first 44 years of life, and then went back there and was involved in some hunts. It's a wonderful two-part documentary of his trip. I highly suggest you go check it out. Very enriching, kind of talk a little bit about the traditions and culture there. It was really fun. And, we talked about all sorts of different things. Some of the recent hunts he's been on, some of the things he likes to cook from those hunts, and just about life in general, being a father, being a, kind of a public figure in that sense too, and what that's like for him. He talked about the legacy approach to that. And we just had a great conversation. Janis is a wonderful guy. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode. And thank you so much for tuning in. So without further ado, here is the podcast with Janis Putelis of MeatEater. Y'all enjoy. Hey, Yanni, how you doing today, man?
I'm good. How are you, George?
Fantastic, man. I'm glad you joined me today. Kicking off year 3 of the podcast. So it's very exciting to start off with the great interview with you. And I wanted to kind of, just at the very beginning, for those who may not be familiar with you or with MeatEater, there's going to be some things I kind of want to, bring around. It's kind of a little bit of 101 introduction. I wanted to maybe start with you talking about where you grew up, um, you know, maybe how you kind of got involved with your love of the outdoors, some of your mentors in that space, and just kind of lay it out and we'll kind of build from there.
Sure. I was actually born in Indiana, but we moved up to Michigan. I was about 8. My dad was, I probably put it on his shoulders that he was the one that got me interested in hunting. Pretty classic. Like as a 6-year-old, started walking around in the woods with him, carrying a stick instead of a gun, and then. I think the first, I had my hunter safety when I was of legal age to hunt in Michigan. And then I grew up hunting Michigan and Wisconsin. Those are kind of the two main things we did. I I asked for a lot of other hunting, small game hunting. Like I had the bug and wanted to go and just walk around the woods and kill whatever I could. But my dad really wasn't that into the small game or the fishing or whatever. So on one hand, I count the amount of times we went after squirrels or grouse or anything like that. And like I said, it's weird because the angling, like his dad was a huge fisherman and built his retirement house on a lake and fished, almost every single day, if the fishing was good. And so it's kind of interesting that the fishing kind of skipped a generation. But yeah, so I credit him with getting me into it. And then obviously the folks that we hunted with, probably more so in Wisconsin. There's a little bit of a tighter group there. But I actually did an episode, I think it's called like Wisconsin Whitetail Roots or something along those lines. You can find that on the MeatEater YouTube channel. But there, I actually interviewed a couple of the, my early mentors there, and they tell some funny stories about me being a kid there and growing up hunting. So I would say that Wisconsin hunting is probably a little bit closer to my heart than the Michigan hunting. I don't know why exactly, but so much so that when the opportunity came about to buy in on some of that property and become like a partner with my dad, I did that just a couple of years ago. And so hoping to keep that property in the family for, generations if my kids want that. So but yeah, that's early mentors, I guess. And I moved to Colorado when I was 18 and on my own, just wasn't going to school and no real plans other than I wanted to spend a lot of time going fast down a hill on snow. And there I met an outfitter who offered me a job. And I really wasn't looking to be a guide or anything, but it honestly seemed like a good way to make some money.
Yeah.
and really fell in love with chasing elk around in the mountains. And as much as I love sitting in a tree stand now for hours on end, I got no problem sitting dark to dark these days. That was something that I was like running away from when I left Michigan. And when someone told me out west that like, oh no, you can just walk all day, just keep the wind in your face, and like that's considered hunting here. I was like, oh, thumbs up, man. That sounds like my kind of thing, you know. So, um, yeah, that opportunity got me into guiding, and then I guided for I don't know 10, 12 years in Colorado, and then hooked up with my buddy Jay Scott and guided in Arizona a little bit, Old Mexico a little bit, and then yeah, that took me to MeatEater, and I actually met Steve at Rinella from MeatEater through his wife. She and I went to high school together,
Hmm.
and I was kind of the only person that she knew that hunted and fished. And so when she would try to join the hunting and fishing conversation, which is happens a lot at their household, she would drop my name a lot. And eventually Steve's like, man, I better reach out to this guy. He sounds serious, you know? And so that's kind of how that got going. And yeah, here we are like 12, I think, yeah, Steve and I are 12 years in. So we've been yeah, we've been adventuring and making, you know, hunting media of one sort or another for a dozen years now.
Well, it started out when you were in Alaska, right? And he was going there to do a hunt. And then you kind of, was that your first meeting? Was you guys kind of in the field?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was living in Fairbanks, and I
Mhm.
think, you know, they flew into Fairbanks. He had drawn a toque sheep tag. You know, that's a MeatEater episode. I think it's a two-parter.
Mhm.
Paul Neese from Vortex is with us, and we kill a sheep and a bear on that hunt. And yeah, that's the first time I met him is when they picked me up from my house there, and then we drove down to Toke and flew into the mountains for whatever it was, 9-day hunt, and had a good time, got along, and they had another hunt on the back end of that, which is when they take Tim Ferriss
Yep.
caribou hunting, and they begged and pleaded for me to go, and I really couldn't because my wife had an interview in Salt Lake City. So she was flying from Fairbanks to Salt Lake for an interview, and we had a 1-year-old kid at the time, and so I was going to be at home with the kid. And I still to this day don't know what the producer said or how much he paid. But by the time I flew out of the bush, the producer's like, "Yeah, man, we got the go ahead. You're going caribou hunting." I'm like, "No way." And sure enough, my wife's like, "Oh yeah, no big deal. I'll just fly with a 1-year-old from Alaska to Salt Lake and just drop her off at her friend's house, go do my interview, and then fly home so that you can go do this." So big props to her because that definitely, I think, going big 2 trips in a row like that, it sealed my fate. You know.
Yeah. I wonder if she knew what was in store for you and your travels at that point, what can was opened up.
Yeah. Right. I don't know if she probably wasn't aware of how much I would be traveling, you know, 5 years down the line. But it hasn't that part of it. It's bad. Anybody that travels a lot for work knows, you know, especially when you have young kids.
Sure.
Because I think with like a spouse, it's no big deal because you're like, okay, how much time do we actually need together? I mean, nobody spends 7 days a week, 12 hours a day with their spouse. People that
Right.
do kind of, you know, tend to get at each other's throats. But I think when you have kids, you realize very quickly how much you're missing and that time is fleeting. And so when I am home, I'm very I feel very free to like cut out of work to pick up the kids at school at 3:30, or you know, cut out early to make sure I can make a volleyball game, or you know, help out on a field trip or whatever it is to spend time with them, and obviously make sure, you know, to be home for every breakfast and dinner. It's a top priority because my oldest is 12 now, and I mean, I feel like now when there's only like 4 to 5 years left when she's going to be living in our household, it gets real serious because you're like, well, what are we going to do with those 5 years, you know?
Yeah, man. I mean, my oldest is she's out of the house, but our youngest is 11, and that we saw how quick time went with our oldest, and it's like, wow, man, it's those are fleeting moments, and you got to capture them and do as much as you can. I was kind of curious too. I know that you and your daughters and your wife too. I mean, I know recently you just went on some turkey hunts together. How long have you been bringing your family like into the field, and like when did your kiddos start kind of gravitating towards that? And are they all kind of gung ho into getting in hunting, or at least going and enjoying the land out there and being the outdoors? What's that look like in that dynamic for you?
Well, we started taking them out. I mean, there really is no time. It was pretty much like if it was turkey season and we had a kid, it didn't matter if the kid was 3 months old or 9 months old or 18 months old. Like we were gonna go,
Hmm.
and we have a kind of like a turkey camp that we do every single year in Montana, and we camp. And so those kids, I think this was year number 9, and my youngest is 10. So that means the first year she was there, she was definitely still in diapers. I don't know if she was right around 1 or maybe 1.5, but she maybe didn't come in the field to actually hunt the turkeys, but they've been around it, part of it, since day one. And we never really even thought about having like choosing a time or an age where it would be appropriate to introduce them to hunting, because to me, I don't know, there's nothing in hunting, even the killing part of it, that you need to be like mature enough to understand or to see or whatever. And we've seen it. I mean, I remember we shot a doe in front of one of my girls, and I don't even know if the kids saw me shoot it, even though it was literally 30 yards away. They didn't really, you know, put two and two together that the doe went there, and then there was a bang and the doe ran off. But once we went over to the doe, the oldest was like right in there checking it out, poking and prodding. And the youngest, I mean, she was little, like 2, 3 years old. She had a kind of a standoff attitude about it, and kind of like stood off for a while, just kind of assessing, looking, and eventually, came over and checked it out. So it's I don't know what was going on in her head in that moment, but she was just being exposed to it, and it worked out well. Um, the second part of your question, though, is like if they are gung ho. I wouldn't call my girls gung ho. They like a gung ho about hunting. They like being outside. They like doing that stuff. If I offer it, they don't say no. There is excitement right now to go back to our Wisconsin deer camp. My oldest has been there 2 years in a row now. This will be her third. My youngest is coming for the first time. There's excitement about all the hunts that we have planned, but I know that my peers have, boys that are saying, that are the peers of my kids that are beating down the door to always be going and chasing and killing something, and it doesn't matter what it is, or to be just shooting guns or shooting bows. And for me, I'm definitely like having to offer it like, hey, do you guys want to go down to the range and shoot the 22 pistol, or should we go shoot our bows? Rarely do I just come home and like they're in the yard flinging arrows. So, gung ho is relative, but I'm happy with where we're at. I mean, Mike, I don't need them to be, outdoor assassins when they grow up, but I do want them just to be lovers of the outdoors and enjoy spending time out there. And hopefully, we'll get to do activities like this until I die. That's my goal. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, man. No, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm always curious about, that kind of dynamic with kiddos and, how people bring them in. I mean, I remember seeing lots of different videos of friends and, someone like Mark Henning who's they got their kiddos, like with all the snacks and all the coloring books and, get them in there and kind of engage them at a young age and kind of walk them through it. And, I'm the same with mine is kind of get them out as early as I can and expose them to it. And, not force their hand, but, hopefully that's like with gentle prodding, they're enjoying it and kind of continuing that
Mm-hmm.
familiar, way of life. So I know that's a
Well, that's
tradition.
been not forcing it has been top of mind. I just happen to have a friend and a brother-in-law who both of these fellows had kids that were maybe pushed a little bit too hard and drugged through, cold mornings and wet, cold mud a little bit too much. And one of them has two boys and the other one has one. And all of them are kind of not really, into hunting. And, it might have been from getting pushed a little bit too much. So I always just try to make sure that it was there, it was available. And then when they do, show any interest, I'm like, all right, all hands in, let's go,
Indeed. Well, I want to backtrack real quick to like when you first started working with MeatEater. Obviously, it's a different role than what you're sitting in now. And I was kind of curious, just like what that evolution looked like from you to kind of coming in and being on the hunt, and then in what capacity that was with for that, first couple hunts you mentioned. And then, eventually you're executive producer, director for the show. I know the show's kind of in a different form and format than maybe we've seen in the past. And I kind of just was curious how just that evolution of your role and exactly how you would describe it now to others who are, maybe listening for the first time.
Sure. I mean, when I was first hired, I didn't even know I was hired technically when I went on the first hunt. I thought I was just getting to go along and sort of was going to help carry some gear in exchange for getting a free flight into the Alaskan bush, which anybody that's done any research on that knows that that's expensive.
Sure.
And we had been there for a year, and I hadn't really been into I mean, we had done some hiking and some touring in the car, but I felt like I hadn't really explored Alaska to that point because I didn't have $1,000 just to get my butt flown into some remote lake,
Right.
And so that was my understanding, that I was just kind of going to go and do a little pack carrying and get a free flight. But turns out I was working, I was going to get paid, which was, I was like, oh, doubly good, And we have a position in, like, when you go out and film MeatEater, there's usually, if it's Steve and a guest, there's usually two what we call a DP, a director of photography, or one person that has that title, and then another person that's just a cinematographer. So you have like a camera dedicated to each person. And then there's a long lens person, which, their job is to basically, make sure you're getting the long lens of animals and getting that kind of stuff, and also shoot a lot of landscape and B-roll and time lapses and whatnot. Then there's a position called the producer, who's sort of running the show, and that's everything from logistics to also sort of in the field directing. And then sort of the bottom rung, the guy that gets, or gal, we've never had a gal hire for this spot, but the bottom rung is what we call the WPA, which stands for Wilderness Production Assistant. And you're basically the grunt. I mean, you just do everything from carrying gear, setting up tents, making fires, prepping food, the grocery shopping before hunts, making sure there's first aid is covered. But if the producer ever needs anything fast, like, they're going to look to the WPA, or if like you forget let's say a camera goes down and you're 5 miles from the truck, and the replacement is, at the trailhead in the truck, well, the WPA is going to be running down the hill, getting the replacement, bringing it back up. So anyways, I did that for, I don't know, at least a season or more. And then, liked it and thought, oh, there's sort of opportunities here. So I started running the camera for the long lens more and more. And I had just a decent eye for framing, framing up pictures, framing up. I mean, really, when you're working the video camera, you're just taking pictures. You're just holding that picture longer, So you still got to frame it up just like you would a still photo. You just got to hold it for 10 seconds or 30 seconds or whatever. So it's not that much different. It's almost slower because you have to just sit there and make sure you hold it long enough and let things happen within that frame. So I started doing that, and then eventually I worked into one of the regular camera positions where I would, actually shoot the people and, the guests or Steve on the show. And then that turned into the producer role, and then that turned into sort of producer director. And I can't even tell you exactly how many seasons I did, but there came a time eventually where after MeatEater Inc. was formed, where the company felt like, I guess it just as a personality, I had gotten big enough where I should just do my own show and not work as, on the MeatEater show anymore. And so I pretty much have left working on that show, unless I show up as a guest, which I still do. I don't know, maybe once a year or so. But for the most part, I just film, produce, my own show, which I'll do, 5 or 6 episodes of annually. And and just doing that. So yeah,
Is that On the Hunt?
yeah, On the Hunt. It's had a couple different names. It was like MeatEater Hunts with Janis Putelis. Right now it's called On the Hunt with Janis Putelis. Just because of YouTube algorithms and whatnot, people are always toying with, what's the best way to title things that go on YouTube, right? Does it even need to be within a series? Does it need to be connected to a certain host? What are the important things, But I do know this, like anytime you drop in like mountain lion or bear, that gets a lot of clicks.
Well, you also doing Gear Talk. Is that going to be coming out for another season with you and
No,
Jordan? Or is
so
that
the Gear Talk podcast, it didn't quite produce enough views or downloads for us. It's it's a bummer because it was fun. Jordan and I had a lot of fun doing it. I think a lot of people liked it. It was educational. It's a tough thing sometimes when just being as big as MeatEater is now. Everything that we do is just held to sort of a higher, not really standard, but a higher volume. Like you need a minimum amount of looks, views, whatever it might be, to call it successful. So I think that I'm not going to mention any specific numbers, but I would bet that our podcast that we did had 4 times the volume of the average, if not even like outside of the MeatEater network. Any other podcast, we were probably doing 4 to 5, 10 times the volume in downloads. But in our network, it just wasn't quite enough to cut it. So we're working on, what's going to come next as far as podcasts for me. But just haven't really landed on, the exact formula that we want to go with. So
sure.
We'll see.
Well, I wanted to kind of focus on real quick one of the, it's a 2-part episode with On the Hunt where you go back to Latvia, your father country, right? And this was actually the very first time that you visited the country, even though, your grandparents, they came from there during World War II. And, there's a lot of the family history. I know you talked about in this, I don't want to kind of go word for what it was, but basically for those who want to watch this series, I highly suggest you do the 2-part series. But, you talk about how you grew up and a very, Latvian was your first language, and you still went to summer school every Saturday, growing up. And that culture was, and that tradition was very enriching in your, life growing up. And then, you finally go and visit. I was curious, one, what was there a reason why it took so many years for you to go back? And did you, when you go back, obviously the focus is on you, and, we can kind of talk a little bit about, what all you went and did there in the hunt and visiting, friends and family. But I was curious if also any of your family members came with you. Is this something that you went on your own? And if you can maybe just kind of lay out that trip and how that came about.
Sure. The short answer for why it took 44 years to get over there would be, life got in the way. I became a hunting guide, right?
Yep.
Or a fishing guide, and just those 2 occupations don't necessarily always pay well enough where you're going to be taking a couple of weeks off to go to Europe, right?
Sure.
But you're doing it, it's a passion. But yeah, with the start of On the Hunt, the show, and me having to host some episodes, coincidentally, the timing worked out where a gal who writes the only hunting magazine in Latvia, she had reached out to me, and we had done a podcast. She had seen me on MeatEater on Netflix. We did a podcast together. And so when I, was starting to think about going over there for a hunt, I had a great connection. And then she was able to connect me with other people and kind of, put the whole thing together for me. I did not bring any family on this trip. Thought about that, but then really thought, it'd be nice just to be there by myself for my first time and just be able to sort of without other distractions, soak it
Sure.
all in, experience it. And so that was 2 years ago. And so just coming up here in about a month or so, I am bringing my whole family over there, and we're going to spend a couple weeks hanging out in Latvia, and we're going to celebrate the summer solstice there. We're going to do a little bit of roe deer hunting, and just general sightseeing and whatnot. So yeah, they're going to get to experience it, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see, what kind of impact it'll have on my girls. I think that they what's the word escapes me. Growing up, I really identified, like I almost had two lives. I had my Latvian social life, Latvian school life, Latvian camp life, and then I had, hanging out with all my American friends. It's not quite that much for them, but I think they still have enough of an influence where they feel somewhat Latvian.
Uh-huh.
And we'll see what this trip over there will how it'll affect them. So we've been brushing up on their Latvian skills, in the language recently. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a good time.
Was that something that you were practicing with them when they were young? Was Latvian something that you were teaching them from a young
Yeah,
age?
I did a much better job when they were young. I was pretty on top of it until I'd say the oldest was 5 or 6. Like even when I was at my in-laws, in North Carolina, I would still only speak Latvian to the girls. And again, man, no excuses, but just slacked off and kind of let it slide. And it's it's tough when you have only one parent in the household can speak the language. Because otherwise you could just, you could barrage them and it would be easy.
Sure.
But when it's only one, it just gets difficult, and people just, it's easy to opt out towards the easy answer as opposed to always trying to be, hammering that away. So they can grasp, a lot of it, if they're just listening to a conversation and they know the basics, but I would not call them fluent by any means.
Well, I think sometimes that immersion in the culture, right? When they go there and you're like forced to kind of understand and speak it on that, 24/7 kind of, volume. Hopefully that is
Sure.
something they can kind of pick that up and get that practice. Everyone I know who's ever gone and traveled abroad, it's usually after about a week or two of wherever they are. It's like the fluency's there, and then they come back and it kind of drops off.
Mhm.
Talking about that trip, you went and hunted there, and so you went you were part of this hunting club. I think there's about like 40 or so members there, and you guys did a deer drive, which you were familiar with because that's something that you had done up in Michigan, right? And like I think you
Sure.
talked about that being almost your first 10 or 12 deers was kind of in that or animals was in that kind of form and format of hunting. Could you maybe just kind of lay out a little bit about what was some things that you took away from as far as learning and being involved and immersed in the Latvian hunting culture? What was that like? And what were some maybe differences that you can see and you can pinpoint from maybe, the deer drives you've done when you were back here in the States?
Mm. Yeah. I don't know if it was that much that I learned, but I mean, there's definitely stark differences. I mean, in the end, you're still just trying to put a bullet through an animal, right? And kill them. But I would say that the drives are, it's not like something that you would just like casually be like, oh yeah, let's get together for a drive next Sunday. I mean, these drives are set up, weeks or even months in advance where it's like, oh no, this Saturday, like the whole club or 99% of the club's going to be there. We're going to have 40 people participating. here's the people that are going to be doing the driving. That was an interesting part of it, where if you were a club member, which it's not hard to become one, the only real hurdle is that it's capped. And so you're basically waiting for someone to, move, like if they decide to leave the club and go to another club, or if they die. And I mean, literally, there was young people like there. I think they only had 50 or so in the club, and I think they said that their waiting list was 20 strong. And I think they just do that to just kind of limit the pressure on the animals, right?
Sure.
But you once you became a member, you could immediately start sort of doing, stand hunting or spot and stalk hunting on your own. Um, but the driven hunt, when you showed up for the big driven hunt, you had to be a driver for 3 years before you could become a stander or a shooter. It was just kind of like, yeah, you're paying your dues. And what was interesting is that once they become a stander, they're not really interested in chipping in on the driving anymore. I'm like, well, because it kind of seemed like we had like we only had 10 drivers and we had 30 or 40 standers. I'm like, couldn't we use a couple more drivers to really,
20 and 20. Yeah.
push and not let as many critters maybe slip through the cracks? And like, there was nobody raising their hand to volunteer. They're like, no, we're standing. The difference is there too. I know growing up when we were driving, the drivers themselves would often have good opportunities at taking an animal, and a lot of times it can be a mature buck, because they're the ones that are slick enough to try to double back and try to sneak through the line. And if you're a good driver and you're paying attention and, stopping, moving, you can get an opportunity. But over there, none of the drivers are carrying weapons, right? And that's just a safety thing. And that was really maybe the biggest difference that's like a very apparent, is that, I mean, there was a safety briefing that probably lasted 20 minutes, 30 minutes in the morning. And then, we all split up into groups because we were driving huge pieces of land. I mean, I'm talking, we were probably driving, I don't know, my first walk probably took me an hour. I mean, I'm just walking through the woods, moving game. And so we all split up, and there was sort of like there was like the main guy that was running the show, and then beneath him there was 5 dudes that would each take a group and sort of place everybody. And just the safety around, like, when they place you in a spot as a stander, which would be a shooter, you're not allowed to move like out of like a 2-yard circle. Like, that's where you're put. And the person next to you is expecting you to be there and not somewhere else. So if all of a sudden, an animal comes through, they're like, okay, that guy was there. So if the animal goes there, I can shoot. So if you've moved, because you thought, the over there was better, that could become a safety issue, right? Because the guy next to you that's now shooting doesn't know where you've moved to. So yeah, the safety was big. What else? You see it a lot when you see pictures of European hunts, when at the end of the day, they lay out all the animals sort of in a very, I don't know how to say it, but I mean, everything's laid out in like rows with all the species kind of lumped together. And it's usually done from biggest to smallest. And it's kind of an odd look, right? Because it's not like something you see in American hunting where there's 20 does laid out, with a couple bucks on the end, right? But they do that, and they're big on putting the piece of greenery on the animal to, as a sign of respect, and to cover up the wound as a sign of respect. They like the classic grip and grin. I mean, I think it happens, but it's not quite as, as important as it is here. Like, we did it briefly with the animals that were taken, but everybody was more worried about really making that group picture with all of the animals, like making that look as good as possible, because it is a group effort, and that really rolls right into then what happens with the meat, which was interesting. So it's a club, and I think we had, I don't know, maybe we had 2 or 3 moose, We had 2 or 3 red deer. I don't think we had a pig that day. So, anyways, there was 5 or 6 animals total. And the moose, a lot of meat on one moose, and
Mm-hmm.
between 40 people, like there's enough for everybody to get some. So they kind of take a poll as to like how much meat do we want to process for everybody to take home today, because the rest of it they're going to process it and then sell it. And then that money that they get from selling that meat just goes right back into the club, and it's used for whatever, building renovations to, you know, feeding animals in the winter if they do any of that, to setting up bait stations or fixing a shooting tower, whatever it might be. Maybe paying a part of the lease that they might have with one of the landowners around there. So that night, I mean, we went to butchering and we butchered, I forget, I think it was 2 or 3 of the animals. The other 2 or 3 were left hanging, and all of the meat was put into these piles on this shelf. And again, you can see this in the episode, but there's these big long shelves that kind of had little,
He
piece
has
of
like a
tape.
cubby, right? Yeah.
Yeah, not even there was no cubby, but it was a long shelf and it just had kind of markings, and you put a pile of meat there. And once there was 40 piles of meat, and some of them had shanks, some of them had more back straps, it was a real mix. But they would just, I got the honor of pointing at a pile of meat. Somebody would read a name, pick a name off the list, and that person would come up, put their pile of meat into a meat lug, and then walk away and do whatever they're going to do with it. I'm guessing put it on ice and put it in a cooler or whatever. And we basically did that. And it was a very some people would say sort of a socialist style of dealing with the meat, because it was like everybody that participated got equal amounts. Just because you're the guy that shot the moose, you weren't getting the backstrap, you weren't going to get the heart.
Right.
It was in a pile, and it was going to be luck as to what pile you got. So that was interesting, something totally different. But I'm trying to think what else was really different about it all. Those were some of the main points. I really enjoyed, midday, like after the first or second drive, we all met back up and had there was a big like cauldron of soup going. And we basically, everybody had a couple bowls of soup with some bread. It was kind of a wet, rainy, cold day. And everybody hung out, and chit chat. I was talking about the morning hunts. And then went on. What was cool later is that it took a long time, but almost every single person that participated had the opportunity to stand up. This was after dinner, and recount their story of their day. Because 40 people, I mean, you might be a mile away from other people that are still involved in the same drive, but you don't know what's going on.
Sure.
And so people would get to stand up and sort of, even the people that just were driving, and just talk about, the encounters with wildlife they had. I mean, I had a giant, not giant, but like to me it looked big, this red stag, or it's a red deer, but a stag, the male, came right by me at 20 yards with a dog, like 20 yards behind it, just pushing it. And it was very cool to see that, right? It's like, oh, that's how it works when a dog's chasing a red deer, But yeah, everybody got to tell their story. The guys that missed shots had to tell their story before the guys that were successful and made their shots. And we had a couple misses. It was funny, to hear those stories.
Did everybody give him a good ribbing? Was it like kind of
Oh yeah.
on?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Now, I was curious, did you ever make it to the Putelis Tavern while you were there?
I did not. That is on our list of things to do while we'll be there while we're there this summer. But I did not make it 2 years ago.
Well, it seems like it'll be good with the family there. It's a good trip.
100%.
Yeah. So I was kind of curious, talking about hunting, is like, what is something that, you've been looking forward to here, but in the fall, what are some hunts you got going on? But, since we're still kind of at that turkey season, I don't know if it's fully ended for you yet at this point in time, but I just wanted to kind of hear about your turkey season first, then we'll kind of move on. How's everything been going? Where all did you hunt, and what kind of success did you get?
Yeah, I've had a wonderful turkey season. I got to kick it off in Mississippi, hunting. Steve and I do a charity trip, where we raffle off a hunt that we just sort of participate in, and we've done it in at our buddy Matt Cook's place in Michigan a few years, and then this year we did it at the Sledge sort of family compound in Mississippi. And it's through the TRCP, and we basically raffle off the spot for somebody to come with a friend of theirs and hunt with us for turkeys for 3 days. I had never hunted in Mississippi, so I'm like very casually, slowly trying to kill a bird in every state. So got to hunt Mississippi, had a great hunt, ended up killing bird on the last evening, like at 5:30, which is one of the latest birds I think I've ever killed. Normally, the evenings aren't known for good turkey action, but I
Sure.
was able to get four gobblers fired up and called them in and killed one of them. And then I think from there, I did a hunt with my dad in Wisconsin. We were successful there. I did a Montana hunt, my annual family hunt with my kids in Montana, and both my girls killed their first birds. The oldest killed the Jake, the youngest killed the gobbler. It was hard hunting, like they weren't playing ball well, so we kind of had to bushwhack both of them, which is fine. It's great. My kids are just old enough where they're starting to make their own decisions and their own moves about how to deal with, a hunting situation, or like in the middle of a hunt. Like I'm not having to quite tell them every single move to make.
Sure.
And man, it's such a joy as a parent to just see your kids be like, oh, I know what I need to do. I'm going to do it and execute it, versus me having to be like, okay, push, move forward, move forward. Okay, stop. Okay, now point your gun there. It's like they're getting to the point where they're like, oh, the turkey's probably going to come out there. I'm going to get my gun up and get ready. And that's great to see. And then I finished off my season. I say finished. We have a few weeks left. It goes till the end of May here. So we might get out another day or two in Montana. But I finished off in Arizona last week. I drew a Gould's turkey tag, which was way cool. And got to hunt in the southeast part of the state. There's only so many places that Goulds live in Arizona.
Right.
I think they have somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 Gould's turkeys in the state now, and they have approximately 80 tags. So I was very, very lucky to draw. Feel very fortunate, and had a super fun hunt. With only 80 tags and that many birds, like they spread the pressure out. I never saw another turkey hunter, and the birds, were totally playing ball. And it's cool to hunt in country that's just super dry, super rocky. Like the flora is totally different, than when I'm used to hunting turkeys in. And rattlesnakes cruising around, just way different, than hunting the eastern in Mississippi or Wisconsin. So yeah, I got my Goulds, which turned me
Nice.
into I believe that makes me a royal slam holder, which means I've killed, the 5 subspecies of turkeys that are on our continent.
Nice.
I'm not.
Congrats.
Yeah, there's that other one, that ocellated bird that's down there in Central America, and I'm like, I don't know. I would go for the adventure, but like the thing doesn't gobble. You don't really call it in. I don't know if that's really like a bucket list item for me to go kill one of those ocellated birds, but anywho, yeah, so great turkey season, and obviously the highlight was, get my girls on some birds,
Yeah.
and they're itching for more. They're saying they want to do another day or two, so that's a real win. But we also have till June 15th for bears here, and I have not taken a walk with my bear gun yet, and I'm definitely going to try to get in a few of those uh, before the season's over. I've yet to kill a bear. That's not true. I killed one in my yard once that Mingus had treed. It was a problem bear that would eat some of our chickens, but I don't really count that as a hunted bear,
Yeah, it's more of a nuisance hunt, right?
Yeah, totally. It was just basically a, assassination.
Well, you posted some pictures that you had taken, I guess, with your mobile camera there of the basically a kind of a semi pond that you developed. You dug out, you had kind of water it's filtered in there, and you ended up having a picture. I think it was like 4 or 5 fairly good sized bear that are over at the property there. Is that the ones you're talking about maybe going after? Is that during that season that lasts, or is this a separate season than Montana?
No, yeah. So Montana is just general bear season. Most units goes till June 15th. I
Mhm.
don't think Wisconsin even has a spring season. I'm pretty sure they don't. It's only a fall season. Most of it's done baiting. I think you can stalk around the hills a little bit, maybe try to catch them feeding, on some oaks, on some acorns somewhere. So I'm mostly talking about going spot and stalk hunting here in Montana.
Yep.
Although I've been applying for years for a tag in Wisconsin, and I finally drew this year, which is a little bit of a surprise. I was mostly just putting in to get a preference point, and so I have the tag. Um, and I don't know, we'll see. If you're going to bait, like for me living in Montana, I'm going to have to pay somebody,
Sure.
to do the whole bait thing, and that's not, cost money, right? So
Yeah.
um, I don't know. I mean, it'd be fun. I mean, like I said, I love sitting in a tree stand, and I think I could, in Wisconsin, sit over a tree stand for a week over some bait and see if a bear comes in. So, but I was telling you before we started recording, my dad's gotten lucky, I think, drawing this tag 2 or 3 years in a row, and they've been putting a good bit of effort into baiting, keeping 2 or 3 bait sites going, and then hunting. And I think the season opens about the middle of September. And him and his buddies just like it just seems like as soon as 2 days before the season opens up, the bears just vanish off our cameras. And I don't know where they go or what they're doing. But they kind of leave the baits, and yeah, they're just not that into it. So we'll see. But it's an option. It's an option. I hate to leave the mountains in September because I love hunting elk.
Sure.
But with the bear tag and a healthy population, I mean, I don't know. I have fun hunting anywhere for about anything. So we'll see as time gets closer.
If you had to pick a favorite, if you had like a choice to go on one hunt, it's like it's your last hunt. What would that
Mm.
be? What is the thing that you like to hunt? And is that tied into what you like to eat from the hunt? Or is it just something about that hunt that you love being out in that particular set of elements?
Man, it's a complicated question, so I'm gonna give you a complicated answer. Because if it's like you only have one hunt left, you're gonna go and do. I'm gonna go do some crazy mountain hunt for mountain sheep.
Yep.
On foot, covering big country, in big country. Living out of a backpack like that to me is sort of the ultimate adventure.
Hmm.
It's taxing physically, mentally. There's a lot of unknowns. Like I like that. Sheep are cool. They taste great. But that's it's a very expensive hunt. I
Sure.
got lucky, drew a sheep tag a few years ago. More than likely, I'll probably never have another sheep tag in my life again. Even though I will continue to play the game, I'm gonna have to have some luck to get another tag. So, man, it would probably come. It's a tough call. It's right between like archery elk and springtime turkeys. Both of them, I like them because I get to interact and call the animals. Um, and, you know, the bull elk is just a bigger, more powerful animal. So those things at 30 yards bugling definitely have a little bit more impact on my heart rate than a gobbler at 30 yards. That being said, those gobblers still get me really excited. And it sure is nice when you knock one down that you can just sling it over your shoulder and walk out of the woods where, when you knock an elk down, you're like, all right, now the work starts, who can we
Sure.
call?
Indeed.
Um, so, but Yeah, man. Yeah, those turkeys and those elk. That's definitely where my heart is. I don't
Well,
know. It's hard for me, man. Like
yeah,
I said, I love hunting it all, and that's I'm a Wisconsin landowner because I love sitting in a tree, waiting for a big white-tailed buck to walk by too. So
sure, sure. Well, I was kind of curious too. I mean, you got some fresh turkey in the freezer. I'm sure that there's all sorts of things in your freezer from your hunts and whatnot, but I was kind of curious, what are some of your go-to wild game meals you cook with your family? Do you guys have some things earmarked for your turkey? And then also have you checked out Jesse's The Turkey Book and getting any ideas from that? Kind of what's on your plate for the next few months of maybe some things you're going to be cooking.
yeah, I have checked out his book. I haven't done a recipe out of it yet. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It's over there on my bookshelf. Jesse's, you got to like really not all of them, but there's everyone that I'm like, oh, I want to make that. I'm like, oh, I need like a whole Saturday to get that one prepped up. Our most of our turkey, my kids love making schnitzel out of the breast
Hmm.
meat, and they will not have it unless there's a wedge of lemon. Like they feel like those two things go together. And if you serve schnitzel with no lemon, they're liable just to walk away from the table. The legs and thighs, are usually braised down. Sometimes I just do some in just a very plain stock just to have it braised down, and then I can kind of do whatever I want with it once it's cooked.
Hmm.
Sometimes I do more of like a, Mexican green chili kind of a flavor. Um, but whatever it is, it's like I like to when I say process, kind of like get the meat cooked and off the bone, kind of shredded, and I'll freeze like pound packages of that shredded turkey leg meat.
Yep.
And then we can put it into, like I said, like a green chili, some other soup. You can make tacos, burritos, that kind of stuff with it. Sometimes we'll sort of just crisp it up in a pan and put it over a salad. So a lot, we try to have 10 turkeys in the freezer. And I don't know if I'm trying to think. I killed three, the girls. So we're at like six right now. So it'd be good to at least get a couple more. But that way we can kind of eat one a month until next turkey season shows up again.
Wise.
Um,
Like it.
and big game. I've kind of been hot lately on, I've got kids and they're like that age where they're busy kids. And so dinners, often are like, how easy can we make it? So I've been on a kick where I've been making, pretty plain Jane Italian flavored meatballs. But instead of trying to fry them in a pan, I'll make sheet trays of like 30 per tray and I'll make, 200 in a sitting. We're actually going to do it here tonight or tomorrow. And instead of trying to fry them in a pan, which like makes a big oily mess, and it's hard to kind of keep them round when they're in the pan, instead, I just stick them into the oven under the high broil
Yep.
and give them about 10, 12 minutes. And man, they come out perfect. And it's way faster. Like, because I kind of lamented sitting around rolling meatballs in a fry pan, and I know that that's the traditional way. They probably taste better. But again, where I'm at in my stage of life, it's like fast is best. And again, I can make 200 of them in one night. We can eat them that night, and then I'll vac seal them in, 15 to 20 per package. And then anytime you want to have meatballs and spaghetti, it takes 5 minutes to thaw them out and cook them. So been doing that a lot lately. I've actually got a I don't even know, it could turn into a chili, could turn into a stew. I've basically got like the neck of a coos deer that I chopped up into, you know, not quite half-inch cubes, browned it, stuck it in the crock pot with I think like a can of like a brown beer, couple cans of tomatoes, and quickly fried up like two pieces of chopped up bacon and put it in there and just let that go overnight. So now I've got a nice base, I've got some tender meat, and I could go all kinds of directions with it. It can go, more into a stew direction with some carrots and potatoes, or I could take it into more of a chili direction with obviously chili seasonings and some beans maybe. So, yeah.
So what
I mean, I don't know. It's around here, it's pretty much, unless we're out to dinner, it's every night. So once a week, we're eating like a basic wild game steak, which is usually just pan seared in an iron skillet. And then sometimes if I'm feeling it, I'll make a little sauce for it. Other times it's just served as is with the pan juices. Um, that's like a weekly staple. And there's usually like a starch and then like some vegetable on the side. Uh, yeah, I don't know. That's about yeah. I could keep going, but those are a lot of our staples that I'm working with right now.
Nice. Well, and I
Yeah.
was curious too. I remember reading that, you spent a few years in a professional kitchen. I was curious, what capacity was that? Were you a cook? Were you a chef? Was this something that, you're kind of using all those skills now in that same way? What was that like for you? And what era of your life was that when you were working in the kitchen?
That was ages, it was right when I moved from Michigan out west. So I was 19, 20, 21 were
Okay.
probably my years in the kitchen. And then I stayed working in restaurants, but I went to the front of the house because the money was just
Yeah.
so much easier and so much better. Um, but yeah, man, I'm very thankful to have that 3 years of experience it was a busy kitchen. It was a kitchen where the chefs like gave a shit about making good food, and like all of our sauces were made from scratch. We did like it was Italian-y, what do they call it? Contemporary or, Italian American fusion. So there was, a lot of plenty of Italian, but the marinara was made from scratch. The chicken stock was made from scratch. All of our cream sauces were made, usually on the fly in the pan from scratch. And just learning how to work fast in a kitchen under stress, when you're serving 400 plates a night.
Sure.
It was a great experience. And yeah, and then just all those, and the same thing, kind of similar to the path in MeatEater. When I started there, I was like working the salad station, and you're like, you learn how to make Caesar salad dressing, right? And then you start frying stuff. And then from there, we had a wood burning pizza oven. So I worked there for a while, and then moved over to the grill, and then the pasta station, and then worked as the expediter. And, all that stuff is good experience. And yeah, it definitely, I wouldn't say I was never a chef. I would just consider myself a line cook. But it gave me good experience, and it just makes it easy for me at home now to say, read a recipe, understand a recipe, and be able to execute it without too many questions. Like there's not a lot of things where I read around food or how to make food where I don't understand how, like I don't have an idea in my head about how to make that happen and what the end result should look like.
Sure.
Um, I've actually been just killing it on the pound cake. When I was in Mississippi, Taylor Sledge's mom made this pound cake that I thought was just incredible. I mean, just had the perfect consistency, like not too like wet and like kind of ooey gooey dense like you get sometimes, and not too cakey. I mean, just that nice, to me, perfect pound cake where she called it packy, where you can almost take it and kind of pack it into like a tighter, consistency if you wanted to. Anyways, I got her recipe. Well, I can tell you that when you take a recipe that's from sea level in Mississippi, it doesn't translate to 5,000 feet in Montana. So I've been tweaking it. I'm probably on like my 10th or 12th, attempt, and it's getting there. It's good. The kids are eating it. But yeah, I've been on a real pound cake roll. I consider it like a superfood. I mean, it's so simple. It's like butter, sugar, flour, eggs, and then you add whatever little bit of, flavoring, whether it's vanilla, lemon. Some people put some, those like fancy boozes into it if you want. But like as far as like a trail snack goes, it's great, man. I mean, you're getting like all the things that you need, while you're active. I've been running a lot lately, getting ready for a big race here in June, and that pound cake's fueled a few miles for me for sure.
Nice. Well, what race are you doing? I know you've been doing some serious training over the years, and is this something that's
Yeah.
kind of a little bit more newfound for you, or is this something you've always kind of done, and we're just maybe seeing it a little bit more now on social media style?
I started, yeah, it's definitely, I just probably just haven't talked about it as much, but I probably started running seriously or when I was maybe 25 to 30, somewhere in that date range. I was living down in Colorado, and I did some trail races down there. I was every year I would run this, I think it was the Vale Trail Half Marathon is what they called it.
Mhm.
It's a pretty good run. I think it's got like 5,000 feet of elevation gain over 13 miles, that's a chunk in 13 miles. I mean,
Sure.
you're climbing. Um, but yeah, so I don't know. I'm 45, about to turn 46. Probably by the time this podcast comes out, I'll be 46. And so I don't know, close to 20 years of running. And mostly it's been really just to stay in shape for mountain hunting,
Right.
or just, and that's probably where it started, because I actually smoked cigarettes up till that point. And so when I quit doing that stupid thing, I thought, oh, I could like be even healthier and the reason I quit is because my uh, fellow guides were just whooping me going up these hills. And I was like, man, I can't have this, And so quit smoking, started running, and yeah, I've done it just to stay in shape for mountains, but that sort of has transformed into just staying in shape for life.
Yep.
Uh, because at 46, it's like you let yourself get out of shape. It takes a year to get back into shape, so
Yep.
you can't really let it lapse anymore. Where even up to a couple of years ago, I would like kind of take off the fall and maybe even kind of take off part of the winter. And now I'm like, no more of that. It's just like you're going to continue running through hunting season and through the winter. And now that I've picked up lion hunting and chasing my hound through the mountains, that's been a great way to cross train, because I mean, we put in big miles, they're hard miles. Sometimes you're in feet of snow. And it's one of the beauties that I love about chasing the hound is that when you cut them loose on a track, you have no idea. I mean, it could end 200 yards up the hill. It could be 2 miles and two drainages over, and multiple thousands of feet of up and down. You just don't know. And I think in general, that's what I love about hunting is that unknown, and that makes it an adventure. But back to running. I would say that in the last, I don't know, 5 years, I've maybe taken it a little bit more seriously where I've thought about doing some longer runs. And 2 years ago, I ran a 50K, which I think is 31 miles. And that's called the Rut, and that's down in Big Sky,
Hmm.
Montana. And then this year, I signed up for a race that's called the Bighorn Ultra Trail or something like that. And they have a bunch of different distances. I'm running the 50 mile this year. And then if all goes well, my plan is I've kind of made like a little goal with myself, a little challenge. I'd like to run a 100-mile race before I turn 50. And from what I just told you, if it goes well in the 50, I'll probably run the 100-mile next year because there's just no reason to quit. Like
Yeah.
I've built myself up to this point. I might as well just keep going and get and knock out that next distance. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. People talk about you get into this crazy mental space, or you can where you get these real highs and lows with these longer races. And I'm intrigued by it, right? You kind of want to go to that place and experience that and see how you react to it. But I've had some friends tell me that I really am not going to experience that with 50 miles. It won't be until I get to mile 70 or 80 to where you're really going to be in sort of like, a place where, I don't know, some people talk about hallucinating, or
Yeah.
just, laying down and sleeping for 2 minutes and you feel like you slept for 3 hours, right? Like just, you know, different experiences that, I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. Running's great because it's so cheap, right? You don't have
Yeah.
to have a bunch of money to go and run and to go experience great things just via your own feet. You need some shoes, some kind of, shorts or whatever. Obviously, if you're going to run for hours, you need to somehow carry some water, but,
And your pound cake.
Yeah. And some pound cake, and you're ready to roll.
That's awesome, man. Well, look, I know that you've got your afternoon ahead of you, and I don't want to take too much of your time. So I just wanted to kind of finish up with a couple questions. And this one I ask most of my guests, and very curious to hear your take. And that's one about legacy. And, I know legacy, a lot of times it's after you're gone, right? But I believe in a living legacy and what you're doing here now, and how that kind of it ripples out through your life and through your children's life and everything. And so I was kind of curious about your take on your own personal legacy and professionally. What is it that you hope that you are having people remember you now and, in the future, by your actions, by your experiences, by your teachings, by everything that you're sharing in your life? Because obviously, you've reached a lot of people, millions of people every year, tune in to see you, to see Steve, to see, everyone else a part of the team. And, I was just kind of curious how you take a look at that. And if that's something that you kind of consciously think about in a day to day.
That's a good question. I like the very end of it. It is not. I've never really been, even when I first met Steve, one of the first things he said to me was like, "Hey, if you're interested in having your own hunting show, we could like make something like that happen." And I'm like, "Nah, not really interested in that. I prefer to stay under the radar." And it's like, well, here we are now. And so yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm too young to be thinking about sort of like a legacy. I mean, if you're talking about a living legacy, uh, right now, I would like my kids to feel like they have a really great dad that's, trying to do the absolute best he can for them to make their great childhoods and to give them what they need, a good base to, turn into good adults. You know, Kind of like hope my wife feels the same way, that she feels like she's got a good partner to, get through this adventure together with. Professionally, it's tricky, man, because we do what we love. It's a super fun job. We make, media, a bunch of different versions of it. We get a lot of thanks for what we do, and a lot of people tell us that they're affected. Sometimes it's hard for me to connect those two, because I don't know. It's just like, oh, I'm just out here talking about hunting, but somehow it really positively affected you. But sometimes it's hard for me to make that connection, if that makes sense. So I'm happy that that's happening for people, and if I can help make the world a better place by getting people involved in the outdoors, putting a smile on their face, then that's a win-win for me. So yeah, I hope that just overall there's a net positive for my being here on this planet versus a net negative. Pretty simple.
Well, it's definitely a positive, man. I mean, I know a lot of people, hunters and non-hunters alike, who have definitely been influenced by you, and by MeatEater, and kind of learning and maybe even adapting into a new lifestyle that they hadn't before. And so it's kind of neat to see that kind of transition, and what you guys stand for, all the things you've been doing, whatever it's conservation, land access initiative. There's so many different things you guys bring to the table that I feel is a huge positive. Obviously, I think you're a hell of a guy, and I appreciate everything that you're sharing out in the world, and I appreciate you taking the time to come here and chat with me today. And for anyone else who's ready to follow, and maybe if they don't already, follow you on socials, or find out the website. If you can just go ahead and plug where people can kind of see what you got going on, and maybe some of the YouTube shows that you have with On the Hunt and things like that, and where people can join.
Yeah, totally. So, my personal stuff is really mostly just found. If I'm going to do social media, it's going to be Instagram, which is my name, Janis_Putelis. And Janis is JANIS_Putelis. And otherwise, I'm on still probably, I don't know, 75% of the MeatEater podcasts, as a co-host there with Steve and the many other co-hosts that we have on the MeatEater podcast. So you can hear me chatting there a lot of times with all the great guests that our podcast producer Corinne comes up with. The show is called On the Hunt with Janis Putelis, and that's found on MeatEater's YouTube channel, alongside the regular MeatEater show, and all the other great shows that we have. Cal's show, I think it's Cal in the Field. Spencer Newhart's done a cool show called Pardon My Plate, which is really fun to watch. We've got deer hunting stuff from Wired to Hunt, Mark Kenyon, Tony Peterson, the Element guys. Who else? Not to forget, I mean, back in the podcast realm, Clay Newcomb's Bear Grease, Brent Reeves's This Country Life. A lot of great stuff. Whether you find it under, the MeatEater Podcast Network or, go to the MeatEater YouTube channel and you'll see. And a lot of the podcasts now are video feed as well. So if you like watching, the conversation, you can do that on YouTube as well. Everything MeatEater in the MeatEater universe. And if you happen to come to Bozeman, you can come to our new flagship store right on East Main.
Yeah, that just opened last
down.
month, right?
That's right.
Very exciting.
Great place to try on, touch, and mess around with all the First Light gear. A lot of MeatEater merchandise, hats, t-shirts, hoodies, that kind of stuff. And then a smattering, I would say, of outdoors goods where, if you're in a pinch and you need something to make it out into the woods to go hunting, all besides like ammo, rifles, bows, arrows, we're not carrying those kind of goods, but, the stuff for your body, binos, knives, and sleeping out in the woods, we got you covered there. So it's a cool experience. There's a bunch of cool mounts in there, a lot of MeatEater type memorabilia, antlers that like the moose my dad shot in Alaska 6-7 years ago, which is a real crowd favorite of an episode.
Oh yeah.
That moose is in there. Steve's big moose from last year is in there.
Nice.
But yeah, so it's a cool spot to go check out if you're in Bozeman.
Yeah, well, I definitely plan to come out there and visit, man. I want to check that out in person, say hello to you guys, and definitely get together again sometime. But again, Janis, thank you so much for joining the podcast, and thanks for all you're doing, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, George.
Cheers, man. We'll talk to you later on.